The greatest players, the greatest coaches, the greatest plays, the greatest games. Commitment to excellence. It's a commitment to excellence. You have to win.
Just win, baby.
Great games we've played in, we could get the greatest coaches. We may take a player in who has been a failure somewhere else, but it's predicated on bringing them into an environment that can inspire in them the will to do great.
When NFL legends talk about Al Davis, they all say the same thing. He was the GOAT. But here's what blows people's minds. For decades, the rest of the NFL treated him like the enemy. They saw him as a bully, a troublemaker who didn't play by the rules. He sued the league, he moved his team, he fought with the commissioner. He was polarizing and aggressive. But when you talk to the legends who actually played for him, who wore that silver and black uniform, they tell you something completely different. These guys won championships, they changed the game, and they respected Al Davis because of exactly who he was. They're about to tell you why. But first, if you're loving the story about why these legends have mad respect for Al Davis, hit that hype button right now and give this video some hype. Jump into the comments and tell me which Raider legend deserves the most respect. That's how we keep these stories alive, and let's get to it. The man was complex and powerful. He was feared and he was loved, and those two things weren't in conflict for the people closest to him. They were deeply connected in ways people couldn't understand. When you understand why the Raider Nation is different. You understand why once a Raider, always a Raider isn't just a saying. It's a promise. It's a bond. It's something much bigger than football itself. These legends are about to show you exactly what that means. Number 5, Marcus Allen. Marcus Allen's story with Al Davis is the most complicated relationship any legend had with him. These two had a real public feud that lasted years. Allen felt like Davis was doing everything he could to mess with his career and his legacy. On the surface, it looked like a war between an owner and a player who didn't see eye to eye. But something changed when Davis passed away. Marcus Allen came back to the organization. He came back to pay his respects to the owner. Why? Because he understood something most people never get. The Raider standard was bigger than any one person. It was bigger than any fight. Even during the height of their feud, even when things were rough, he respected the pride and poise Davis had built into the organization. He respected the commitment to excellence. Davis didn't just make money or win games. He built something that outlasted conflict and lasted lifetimes. When Allen returned, it wasn't about forgiving Davis. It was about honoring what he created. That culture was so powerful it pulled Allen back, even after they'd been at odds. Allen recognized that Davis built an organization where winning was everything. That singular focus, that drive, that commitment to excellence created a will to win in every player who wore that silver and black. The Raider way wasn't designed to fall apart when people disagreed. It was designed to last. Cheryl Nichols was a bridge between players and the owner, embodying what Davis stood for. Allen came back because the Raider standard reflected his own standards. He was a Heisman winner from Lincoln High. He knew what greatness looked like. And Davis understood that. Davis demanded it. That's what Allen respected. That's what brought him home. Number 4, Jim Plunkett. Jim Plunkett has one of the most incredible comeback stories in football history, and Al Davis was the reason he had that story at all. Before Davis gave him a shot, Plunkett was done. The league had already decided he was a bust. The New England Patriots said so. The San Francisco 49ers said so. His career should have been over. He should have been washed up, forgotten, sent home to do something else with his life. But Davis saw something nobody else saw. Davis believed he was a better talent evaluator than his peers. He thought he could spot potential where the rest of the league saw only failure and defeat. So he brought Plunkett in. He gave him a fresh start. He put him in an environment that valued veteran experience. He put him in an environment that valued resilience and the will to win. Plunkett took that chance and he ran with it. He won Super Bowl 15. He was the MVP of that Super Bowl. He was a 2-time Super Bowl champion. And Plunkett never forgot. He stayed close to Davis for the rest of Davis's life. He called him his brother. He called him the man who saved his career. But here's the deeper thing about what Davis did with Plunkett. It wasn't just charity. Davis knew something about second chances. He knew that if a player had been written off by the rest of the league, if they'd been branded as a bust, they had something to prove. They had an edge. They wanted to prove everybody wrong. So Davis built a roster full of guys like that. He grabbed former first-round picks who had fallen apart elsewhere. He grabbed them cheap because nobody else wanted them, and he put them in an environment where they could win. That created an us versus them mentality. It created a culture where the underdog became the champion. When Plunkett succeeded, it sent a signal to every other veteran in that organization. If you commit to the Raider way, if you commit to excellence, your past doesn't matter. Your failures get forgotten. You get a real chance to win. That's what Davis understood about people. He understood that everybody deserves a second chance if they're willing to work for it. Number 3, Howie Long. Howie Long respected Al Davis for something that sounds simple, but actually changed everything about how the Raiders operated as an organization. Davis believed in a pure meritocracy. He believed that your talent mattered more than your baggage. Your talent mattered more than your reputation. Your talent mattered more than what other people said about you or what other teams thought. If you could play, if you had the will to win, Davis would take you in a heartbeat. Nobody else cared what the rest of the league thought about you. Nobody else cared if you had problems. Nobody else cared if you came from a broken background or if you had a bad reputation in other places. Davis cared about one thing. Can you play? Will you work? Can you help us win? That philosophy turned the Raiders into a place called the Island of Misfit Toys. That wasn't an insult. That was a badge of honor. It meant that Davis had gone out and found all these talented guys that other teams had thrown away. Other teams said they were too difficult to manage. Other teams said they had too much baggage. Davis said they were undervalued. He said they were assets. John Matuzak is the perfect example. Matuzak's talent was equal to his troubled personal life. Every other team had given up on him. They didn't think he was worth the headache. Davis grabbed him, and Matuzak became a cornerstone of Super Bowl 11. This meritocracy wasn't just about the players on the roster. It extended to the coaches and the executives running the organization. Davis hired Tom Flores, the first Latino head coach to ever win a Super Bowl. He hired Art Shell, the first black head coach of the modern era. He hired Amy Trask as the first female CEO of any NFL team. And you know why he did all that? Because they were the best people for the job, not for political points, not to look good in the media, because he needed them to win. That's meritocracy. That's the Raider way. You get the best talent regardless of what anybody else thinks about it. You focus on raw skill and competitiveness. You focus on the will to win. And that philosophy led to 16 consecutive winning seasons from 1963 to 2002. That's an insane track record. That's not luck or accident. That's a system that actually works. Long understood that Davis wasn't trying to be controversial. He wasn't trying to make a statement about diversity. He was trying to win football games. And the way to win was to find talent wherever it was hiding and use it. That's why the Raiders were different. That's why the culture was different from everybody else. Number 2, Gene Upshaw. Gene Upshaw went on to lead the entire NFL Players Association, representing thousands of players across the league. But before that, he was a Raider. And he respected Al Davis for something that most people have absolutely no idea about. Long before the civil rights movement was mainstream, long before it was cool to take a stand, Davis was using his power and influence as a football executive to demand equal treatment for black players. This wasn't performative. This wasn't for the cameras. This was real action, real risk. In 1963, during his first year with the Raiders, Davis refused to let the team play a preseason game in Mobile, Alabama. Why? Because the city's laws would have forced the team to stay in segregated hotels. The team couldn't stay together. Black players would have been treated differently. Davis looked at that situation, and his response was simple. "I understand," he said, "and we're not coming." That was it. He didn't negotiate. He didn't debate. He made a decision, and he stood by it. But 1965 is where you see the real moral conviction. The AFL All-Star Game was supposed to be played in New Orleans. When the players got there, 20 black players were harassed. They were refused service in restaurants. They were mistreated by taxi drivers. They were treated like they didn't belong. So the black players, including Raiders stars Clem Daniels and Art Powell, met in room 990 of the Roosevelt Hotel. Art Powell asked his teammates a simple question. Do you want to condone this treatment? Do you want to accept this? Or are you going to stand up? The players decided they would not play under those conditions. And Davis didn't hesitate. He used his influence to move the entire All-Star game to Houston. In 2 days. He relocated an entire championship game because his players deserved better. Clem Daniels, one of the greatest Raiders ever, called Davis a drum major on the issue of civil rights. He called him the moral conscience of the NFL. That's the kind of respect that comes from real action. Then, in 1968, Davis drafted Eldridge Dickey in the first round. Dickey was a black quarterback. At that time, the quarterback position was closed off to black players. Teams didn't believe black QBs could do the job. Teams believed a lot of false things. Davis drafted Dickey because he was the best player available and he could play. He didn't care about stereotypes. He didn't care about what other people said about the position. He believed in merit. He believed in talent. He built a culture where players were judged on the field, not on the color of their skin. That's what Upshaw respected. That's why Upshaw, who became one of the most powerful men in football, remembered Davis as a true pioneer and changemaker. Number 1, John Madden. John Madden took over the Raiders when he was just 32 years old. He became one of the greatest coaches in NFL history. His record was 103 wins and 32 losses and some ties. That's insane. That's legendary. But he couldn't have done it without Al Davis. And that's exactly what Madden understood deep down. Davis was a fierce enemy to people outside the organization. He was litigious. He fought with the commissioner. He fought with other owners. He moved the team. He sued the league. He was polarizing and aggressive, and nobody could control him. But inside the Raiders organization, inside the locker room, inside the facility, Davis was the ultimate protector. Madden said it himself. Davis was a fierce enemy to those on the outside. But there was no better friend to have for those within the organization. That's a powerful statement. That's a coach talking about an owner who had his back completely. Davis absorbed all the pressure. He took all the legal battles. He fought all the political fights. And he did it so that Madden could focus on what Madden did best: coaching, developing players, building a winning culture. The shielding effect was real. Madden could take risks in the locker room that other coaches couldn't take. He could experiment. He could push boundaries. He could be eccentric. He could be innovative. And if the league came down on him, Davis was already fighting them anyway. It didn't matter. Davis had his back. That created psychological safety in the locker room that's almost impossible to find in professional coaching. Coaches live in fear of losing, fear of media criticism, fear of being fired. But Madden didn't have that fear. He had Davis. Davis told him something simple. You started as a Raider, and you'll end as a Raider. That was a promise. That was a guarantee. That was you're part of this family, and you're going to stay part of this family. That loyalty wasn't just personal. It was strategic. It was deliberate. It was a defensive posture. When Davis butted heads with commissioners or other owners, he was drawing fire away from his coaching staff. He was protecting Madden. He was protecting the locker room. He was protecting the culture that made the Raiders special. The fierce enemy persona that Davis maintained with the league office, that was intentional. It was a deterrent. It meant that other owners couldn't bully the Raiders. Other commissioners couldn't push them around. The Raiders knew they were protected. They knew their owner would go to war for them. That's why the loyalty was so deep. That's why Madden respected Davis so much. You don't find that in football very often. You don't find an owner who will sacrifice his own reputation to protect his coach and his players. But Davis did it, and Madden never forgot. He called Davis the best friend he ever had in football, and that came from a man who won championships and changed the game. When you step back and look at all 5 legends, you see a clear pattern. They all respected Davis for different reasons, but those reasons all connect to the same core idea. Davis protected his people. He fought for his people. He defended them. He built a culture that lasted lifetimes and changed the game. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't always right. But he was loyal. He was principled. He was willing to go against the entire league if that's what his people needed to succeed and thrive. The NFL saw him as a disruptor. The public saw him as a villain. But his legends, the men who played for him, they saw him as something else entirely. They saw him as a protector. They saw him as a pioneer. They saw him as a man of his word. When Marcus Allen came back to honor him, even after their feud, that meant something. When Jim Plunkett called him his brother, when he talked about the man who saved his career, that meant something real. When Howie Long praised the meritocracy that Davis built, when he talked about finding talent that nobody else wanted, that meant something. When Gene Upshaw talked about Davis standing up against segregation, when he called him the moral conscience of the league, that meant something. When John Madden talked about having no better friend, when he talked about an owner who protected him completely, that meant something. Those aren't small things. Those are legends of the game saying that this man changed their lives and their careers forever. The Raider Shield represents something bigger than football itself. It represents a commitment to excellence that goes beyond winning and losing. It represents pride and poise that survives personal conflict. It represents a loyalty that lasts a lifetime. Once a Raider, always a Raider. That's not just a motto or a saying. That's a promise. And Davis made sure that promise meant something real and lasting. While the man may have been the most feared figure in the entire NFL, the friend he was to his people was completely unrivaled. Oh, that's the legacy of Al Davis. That's why these legends have mad respect for him.